Over to Peter, the General Secretary of the Socialist Party.
Well, comrades, I know that you didn't get the dialogue, but for me, just to see Trotsky on film is like a holiday. I don't think that the film does full justice for Trotsky in what he was saying, because he was speaking, of course, in English, which was not his first language by any means. He was a linguist, but he found most difficulties with English. But we're going to gather together some of the material of Trotsky speaking in Copenhagen, for instance, and make it into a DVD, which we think will be available not just to the members and supporters of the Socialist Party, but I would say will be of keen interest to the working class and the labour movement, not only in Britain, but internationally. Now, it's almost 70 years since what I consider, and many others consider, the assassination of the greatest living revolutionary at that time, Leon Trotsky. He was assassinated, as is well known, by an agent of Stalin and the Stalinist apparatus in Russia, Leon Trotsky, who, by the way, when he was released after a long prison cell, was spirited back behind the so-called Iron Curtain and was welcomed in the Stalinist states, given the order of Lenin, a horrible perversion, actually, of the idea of Lenin itself. These facts are very well known, particularly to the comrades who are in this meeting here today. But we have a second assassination that is taking place at Trotsky. It's less bloody, but it's more pernicious in a way, because this is a literary assassination of Trotsky. You know, after the end of the English Civil War and the replacement of the regime of Oliver Cromwell, the dictatorship of Oliver Cromwell, but nevertheless, from the point of view of the bourgeois, a very progressive figure, the royalist counter-revolution dug up his body, hung it on a gibbet outside the Parliament and allowed it to rot. It was there for the carrion, for the rats and so on and so forth. Well, they've not done the same, or at least bourgeois public opinion has not done the same. But this book by Robert Service, I make the point in the review, it's a very heavy book. It was quite a sickening situation, by the way, to have to read the book. We got the book well in advance because we estimated that something like Service's approach in this book was going to be necessary for the ruling class, for a very simple reason, by the way, that given the growth of the social crisis in Britain, on the backs of the economic crisis, and internationally, it would be necessary for the ideologues of the bourgeois to actually rubbish Trotsky's account of his own life in particular, but in particular the record of Trotsky in the workers' movement over decades. By the way, when Trotsky's My Life was first produced in the 1930s, and he did it reluctantly, partly because the movement needed money at that stage, there was not one literary review, not one critical review that disputed any of the facts in Trotsky's My Life. Not one single article was produced to challenge the role of Trotsky historically, his ideas, and so on, and particularly the account that he gives in My Life. We have to wait for 70 years after his death to see now, not the Stalinist school of falsification, but the bourgeois school of falsification. Let's go further, the Service school of falsification. Try as I might to find something positive to say about this book, it was very difficult, because every word was a mistake, and some were two mistakes, by the way. So bad was this particular book. We challenged him to a debate. We even considered putting a cardboard cutout of Robert Service up here today, so he'd be with us in spirit. But that doesn't mean to say that because he's not here, we shouldn't, in this discussion, go over Trotsky's ideas, and in particular, it's not a question of living in the past, but learning from the past. How do those ideas, how relevant are they to the modern era, and particularly to the role of Marxists and the followers of Trotsky, the Trotskyists today? The attack on the Trotskyists by Robert Service, and the main challenge, by the way, is apart from the fact he was a terrorist, no discrimination about the kind of terror that was used in the Civil War. I'll comment on that in a moment. But also that he was undemocratic. And yet, as I said at the rally last night, not only has Service refused to debate today, he accepted an invitation by a person in Russia, I won't say much more than that, for a debate a week on Thursday, which, by the way, will be televised as well. He gave an oral consent to that, and then he said, well, it was difficult, because he was smelling a rat from his point of view. He said, well, it was difficult to speak on that occasion, but maybe he could do a television link-up, a video link-up from London. And only after he discovered that I was one of the people on the panel did he withdraw his position. I mentioned that at the rally last night. What is that but a reflection of fear, after writing this book, of discussing with one individual? It doesn't have to be me. It could be any member of the Socialist Party, frankly, who could discuss the ideas that Service has put forward. What happened 70 years ago, almost 70 years ago, was the death of the greatest living revolutionary at the time. He was great like Marx. He had a tremendous intellect. Of that there is no dispute. But Trotsky is famous, not because of his intellect, like with Marx, but because of his method. That's why we defend the heritage of Trotsky in applying that method to the modern era today. You will find some mistakes in what Trotsky wrote, especially of timing, as you will find, for instance, in the works of ourselves in relation to great events. That is indisputable. Occasionally got it wrong. I can only, by studying Trotsky, all the works of Trotsky, most of them I believe, in English, I can only question Trotsky on two issues. One was in relation to South Africa, another was on a secondary question. But on most issues he was amazingly right, including, by the way, the analysis of the situation up to the Second World War itself. Now, his record alone in the revolutionary movement would mean that this man would be one of the pantheon of the greats of socialism and Marxism. He was the organizer of the Red Army. He was decisive in the Russian Civil War, which, remember, defeated not only internal reaction, but the 21 armies of imperialism itself. Which defeated the counter-revolution. He played a crucial role in the Comintern. But as a matter of fact, Trotsky himself said his most decisive contribution was not in the Russian Revolution. It wasn't in the Civil War. It wasn't the construction of the Red Army, brick by brick, out of very limited material, which became a marvellous force that defeated the bourgeois internally and externally. But it was because of his analysis of the degeneration of the Russian Revolution, of Stalinism, which is very crucial. I touched on it yesterday. I'll go over some of the points in these opening remarks. In actually shaping the world today, you only have to pose the question, where would we be, where would Marxism have been, without the analysis of Trotsky of Stalinism, and the ramifications and the implications of that. It was a tremendous example of a dialectical, which means an all-sided analysis of the phenomena of the growth of bureaucratism in the isolation of the revolution in Russia itself. Now, Service is full of growth